Ora si registrerà la conferenza.
Okay, so we just started this dialogue with Domenec Ruiz Devesa, and we are really happy to have him with us today. And thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
You are a member of the European Parliament up until next week, at least. And first of all, in our view, in our perspective, that is the perspective of the Citoyen Research Center at eCampus University in Italy, since we work very hard on civic education and citizenship pedagogy, above all in a European perspective, you've been the rapporteur in the Cultural Committee of the European Parliament about civic education. And that's why we invited you, and we are really keen to discuss with you about that subject, because you reported on it in the committee and in the plenary session in 2022. So nowadays it's 2 years ago. Yet I think that the results, the findings, and the proposals themselves that you made are still alive and still really important, because the framework has remained the same. One of the reasons maybe we are going to delve into them is also that the situation for what regards education in general still remains a situation in which member states have the key role, obviously. So I think that changes in this field are inevitably small, and also we have to wait for them very long sometimes. But that's not my first question. My first question for you is to introduce yourself for our audience. Our audience is mainly in the framework of the Jean Monnet teacher training project that we are developing, and since 2 years we are carrying on. Our teachers mainly at all school levels, not just in Italy, but in different EU member states. We've been working with Portuguese teachers, French teachers, Greek teachers, Spanish teachers too, in reality, and Romanian teachers, etc., etc. So, and we are keen to work with teachers from all EU member states. So, let's introduce yourself, in particular, for what regards the reason also why you took that subject, that topic, among the many topics that you delved into during your term.
Well, thank you. I'm currently a member of the European Parliament, active in the up until now in the Cult Committee, also in the Committee on Constitutional Affairs and the Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. And in particular, in the topic of civic education, I proposed to write this report to the representatives of the political groups in the Education and Culture Committee. And I'm glad that the request was granted, and then afterwards I was appointed the rapporteur, because I think this is a matter of strategic importance. Unfortunately, I think for many people, including, I will say, by and large in the Commission, even more than the Council, they still see this, I think, a bit as a soft topic, namby-pamby kind of topic. But for me, it's really strategic. Why? First of all, because we know we have European citizenship since the Maastricht Treaty in 1993. But if citizens are not aware that they are also citizens of the European Union, then what is it for, really? It's kind of useless. Huh? If you are a citizen and you are not aware that you are a citizen, in this case of a political union that is different than just being a national citizen. So that's number one. Second, there is a big contradiction as well, because second big contradiction, because in the topic of teaching and communicating about the fact that there is European citizenship, the Union in fact has no strong competencies. So it is left to the member states exclusively, at least if you acknowledge that the Union is limited to support competencies, right? So member states are the exclusive actors in teaching about EU citizenship, which is, again, a big contradiction. I mean, how come the Union has nothing to say about how to communicate and teach about European citizenship? And the third big question that connects to citizenship education is certainly the rise of political extremism, the rise of nationalisms, the rise of Euroscepticism, the rise of hate speech, abuse in social media, and so on. So all these requires, in my view, a strategic intervention in terms of teaching about EU citizenship, the fundamental values of the Union, the Charter of Fundamental Rights, the historical memory that is connected to the birth of the European Union. So this is why we have to make it a strategic priority. And that's what the report from the European Parliament is calling for, both to Council and Commission. And yeah, that's why I decided to write this report.
Okay, before asking you some more questions about the report contents, just a question that stems from your third point, because your third reason was, and still is, I think, this rise in the Euroscepticism and nationalism, etc. You told us. Don't you think there's a contradiction which deserves delving into it? I think between the worries about Euroscepticism and nationalism on the one hand, and on the other hand, the fact that when you talk about civic education, I'm sure you're talking about democratic civic education. So when we are worried about some kind of electoral results or some kind of political waves inside the political space of Europe or a nation state, we take a two-sided point of view sometimes. On the one hand, from a democratic general point of view, we should say, okay, everything is acceptable in a way, or better, everything has its own reasons, so we have to find out why this is the political wave, what are the reasons, and we should also answer to this through a new political offer, maybe, which addresses those very roots, the very reasons why the people are going on that side. But on the other hand, when we talk about pedagogy, it's a rather different matter. It's not just a matter of, it's not at all a matter of political offer, but rather of, I would say, building the field, creating a field of action and of thinking for the people in which they're free to choose, they're free to criticize everything. But yes, at the same time, we would expect that from this nationalism or Euroscepticism one tries. But at the same time, it's a hope. It cannot be a direct subject that we teach. I don't know if I correctly explained you could understand my point.
Not sure.
But I think that's okay.
Not sure what you meant.
No, okay. I try to put it in a different way. Don't you think there's a contradiction putting it more simply, between the democratic citizenship education vision on the one hand, and on the other hand, the concern about one kind of electoral results inside a political context. So shouldn't we think that democratic citizenship pedagogy and education, it's not about choosing what are the good results or the good values, etc. It's more in general giving freedom and power to the people to choose, and then even if those choices are not the good ones for us, they are still their choices, and this is about democracy, so you don't have to judge them.
Yeah, I understand now. Well, I think that, of course, civic education and democratic education is not about teaching people how to vote. Let's put it simple. At the same time, it is also true that we have to provide, to endow citizens with the information and the knowledge to make political choices, no? And I think this idea that democracy is just about voting in elections is not correct, no? It's about proper political debate. It's about deliberation. It's about reaching agreements, right? So you need a certain level of education to be able to participate in the democratic process. And this is why civic education is important, to endow you with the knowledge of the common values, the importance of information in the political process. And this is why when you have fake news and disinformation, then the democratic process is devalued. And yeah, there is a certain link, because there are a number of extremist political forces that attack the common values that we have in the Union. And also, it is quite proven they are more adept than standard democratic political forces to use this information, to cooperate with foreign powers that also spread fake news. So yeah, we need to to prepare citizens for these eventualities. Then of course, at the end of the day, of course, no one should challenge the right of anyone to vote in one way or the other.
Okay, yeah, and I totally understand, and I totally agree. I must also add on the fact that a great part of the situation we are living in is linked to this lack of knowledge and lack of education about civic rights and civic participation. That's absolutely true. But still, I wanted to highlight that kind of abstract and theoretical contradiction, because I think it's an inner contradiction inside the democratic view of both pedagogy and a political sphere. Since you are democratic in this perspective, you do not have the power to hinder in a violent way any kind of result inside your society. So whenever something bad arises, the first duty you have, I think, is also to fully understand why. And that's part of the why. Your report and the lack of knowledge, lack of education, I totally agree. It's part of the reason why we're living this situation. So thank you for your answer.
On that, I like to add something that you said in the first frame of your question, that that part I understood. And I agree with that, with your statement that there are a number of structural factors in society that explain the rise specifically of the far right. of the Eurosceptic far right. And this has to be addressed mainly by delivering policy results by the democratic and pro-European traditional political forces. I fully agree with that. In the case of France, it's very clear the big divide between the cities and the countryside, the long-term processes of deindustrialization, social conditions regarding housing, wages, the perception of security that clearly explain why in the first round of the elections, the National Front came up on top. No? And I agree that it's not just with historical memory, even though it's important. I was told that the problem with historical memory is that after 3 or 4 generations, when the people that lived it directly or the children of the people that lived it directly are not there anymore, then it loses a lot of impact. So this is a fact. With historical memory and civic education, it is only so much that you can do. Obviously, you are going to need proper policy responses in terms of delivering results for the people.
Yeah. Thank you for adding this. I totally agree with you. And coming back to the report, I have 2 questions in order to make it better understandable before reading it, or even if we have teachers who are going to read it or have already read it. And the first question is, in your report, you introduce the civic education matter, delivering a sort of summary about the findings and the data and the information that we have from different kind of studies, among them the ICCS, for example, study, etc., but also about the legal framework in different EU member states, civic education, and what are the key findings? The key findings that we have to keep in mind, in your opinion, about the framework in which teachers work today in Europe. I know that this is a question which is in a way almost meaningless because of the differences between different nation systems. But at the same time, there is a supporting competence at the EU level. And since the last, I would say, 20 to 30 years, there's a kind of cooperation, of international European cooperation between national systems, and some kinds of common initiatives have been taken, especially in this field. So do you think there's some general European answer about shared conditions and shared features of the framework in which a teacher behave and act when we talk about civic education? In a negative way, I would say, still.
Yeah, the findings that we report, the report has in a way 2 parts. The first part is a description and an analysis of what we have at the moment. And the second part is a number of policy proposals to improve the situation. And in fact, what we found is a very insufficient statu quo. First of all, there is a big or a large heterogeneity in the approaches. So some member states teach about EU citizenship, some others do not do it at all. Basically, those that do it, there is no common basis. Some use standard curriculum, some others do it outside the curriculum. There are no standards, there are no metrics, there is no common evaluation by the European Union, because in fact there is not a common framework to be evaluated in a consistent fashion. And then also you don't have as well, by and large, training of the teacher training on the topic, which of course or you have it, but again in a very haphazard manner. So there is a total lack of, as I say, of a proper framework to delivering this content. And it is also connected to the fact that there is no common framework either in general for civic education as a whole. And this regards not only the European dimension, obviously, but also the national or the international dimension.
That's sorry to interrupt you, but that's a very key point in our view, because one of my questions was also exactly that, because we talk about the European civic education on the one hand at the EU level, but shouldn't we talk rather about civic education in general at the EU level? Because since 15 years, we're working on this subject. And the first thing that we noticed at the beginning of our pedagogical experimentation is exactly that if you take a pedagogical vision on what education really is, it's never directly about the subject matter itself. It is rather about abilities, methodologies, values, and bigger, I would say, bigger fields of action and knowledge than specific topics. And the first strategy that we experienced from the EU policies inside different kind of financing programs of the European Union, for example, was really a very focalized, specialized strategy about the subject itself, or the EU dimension of citizenship. And it's really ineffective in the framework of education in general, especially in the primary and lower secondary levels, which are far away from the voting right, one could think, but in our view are the real roots of an epistemological and ethic and pedagogical revolution that we would need. So that's the point. So I'm happy that you noticed that and you pointed it in your report. That's really important, and that's why also inside this project, which is called Multiscale EU, not by chance, what we develop, in fact, is an approach to civic education that we named multiscale. So different scales of citizenship, from the local to the global. And one of the things that the citizens lack is the knowledge and the awareness about the fact that from the local to the national and the European, they do have already voting rights, participatory rights, direct democracy, etc., while at the global level, they don't. And that's a huge difference. And I think that an awareness about those contradictions from different levels of institutional organization are key to the teaching of education, of civic education, but they're lacking. So that's a very important point that you made, and I wanted just to highlight. What about the proposals inside the report instead? What are your key points?
Well, yeah, in fact, I think we said this in the report, that citizenship is a comprehensive thing, because what we try to develop is a 360 degrees approach to the question, and citizenship has different levels from the local to the global. The global certainly is the least developed, unfortunately, but there are still some elements of citizenship. For instance, there are some rights that are protected internationally, with the international covenants of civil rights, with the possibility to send a complaint to the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations. Very imperfect, very difficult, but there are even some elements that are actionable at the international level. So this is why in the report we proposed that civic education has to be comprehensive and include all the possibilities at the national, regional, local, European, and international level. And in regards to the concrete proposals, we obviously consider that we need, first of all, a European strategy on the question that we don't have up until now. We need to develop common standards. We need to develop proposals for teacher training. We need to introduce, this is a very concrete and I think with a huge potential idea, to introduce a module, in this case, yes, limited to European citizenship, because we cannot, as things stand legally, determine content on the national dimension, but at least on the European dimension, we propose a module on European citizenship, on European citizenship education, a module to be introduced in Erasmus+, in the European Solidarity Corps, even in training courses financed by the European Social Fund. What does it mean in practice? That every person that is benefiting from Erasmus Plus opportunity, for instance, will be offered to take an online module on European citizenship education. And this can have a tremendous impact from a systemic point of view, because we're talking of hundreds of thousands of people that every year, if not more, benefit from Erasmus+, European Solidarity Corps, or European Social Fund. And this connects with a criticism that we made before in the description that I forgot to mention, if I can come back for a moment without creating much confusion, which is that apart from the heterogeneity of the national systems, the actions by the Union now are very limited. They are limited to the exchange of best practices. Okay, very nice, but these are drops in the ocean, right? We are even finding, which are very, very valuable, even teachers that are part of the ambassadors' schools of the European Parliament, themselves developing at the school level materials and curriculum, which is really commendable. But it is a pity that this has to depend just on the personal initiatives of very motivated people. No? So this is why we need this module. And further down the road, we also proposed the common curriculum. The common curriculum, of course, as a demonstrative curriculum and as a voluntary curriculum, because we don't have the legal competence to impose it on member states, and we don't want, by the way, to impose it. So this is why this is an offering. The Commission has been in favor of the module, not in favor of the curriculum for now. Okay, let's start with the module. I have to say that we have been successful in getting support from the Council, which, by the way, I was not positive about it, because under the Spanish presidency of the Council of the European Union, in November, conclusions were adopted supporting the idea of the module. So now it's on to the Commission to put it into practice. And now I think I will say no excuses, because you have a Parliament report that was adopted with a huge majority, 5 political groups out of the 7 in favor, around almost 500 votes in the plenary out of 705. Okay. So, and now also support from the Council side. So the model we need to have at the very least. Then in the next term, we can continue the discussion and the debate about the demonstrative curriculum.
Okay, so this is also already the answer to my next questions. That is to say, the step ahead and the next challenges we had to face about the proposals themselves that you made. So that's the first one, or the most important one, that is going to be implemented in some ways. I don't know if from a technical point of view, I guess there's no more information than the proposal itself for the time being, because I guess that
there is.
there is.
We proposed the Commission a pilot project from the Parliament to develop the module. The answer was unfortunately negative, on the basis that there is an ongoing cooperation on the matter by the national agencies in charge of implementing Erasmus+.
Okay.
So, okay, we're going to take this to the letter. That means something has to come, something concrete has to come out from this, common project, if we understand it correctly, from the national agencies implementing Erasmus+. But of course, it cannot be left to just voluntary cooperation by national agencies, because if it's not, in the end, we need to have a module that is offered to everyone. If we don't have that, then we will have to come back to the Commission with a pilot project or something. But really, now they need to deliver. They cannot continue to procrastinate with not only Parliament, but Council in favor. I can imagine, okay, let's imagine Council was not in favor, but really, the Commission can be more papist than the Pope, as we say in Spanish.
Okay, no, there's room for civil society advocacy too, and teachers associations advocacy, etc. in this field. Absolutely. That's really important. And also, each teacher, since teaching associations themselves tend to be stronger at the national level for obvious reasons, also targeting their own national agency, Erasmus Plus agency, can be a strategy then. For example, in Italy, we have the Indire agency, which is based in Florence, which is the Erasmus Plus also agency, which could be one of the targeted institutions to which talk and try to advocate for not stopping this proposal. Okay, that's really important, and I think also that's a proposal that stems in a way also from some Italian experiences to which we took part in the last 10 years, because this kind of module linked to every kind of EU funding was a proposal that a group to which we belonged at the beginning of our work in Pisa, based in Pisa, a proposal that we made to the EC representation in Italy, for example, for what regards Italian recipient fundings, etc. So it's a very good idea, and I'm really happy that you. This is a very good example of political initiative that can change things in a systemic way. So it's a very, very important.
It was in fact Roberto Castaldi who proposed this model to me, and I put it in the report.
Yeah, because we worked with him exactly, so that's why I recalled this idea. Okay, that's and in fact we developed also a platform which already had a module about this exactly, which is still going on, because we are. Me and Daniela Martinelli, who are also the coordinators of the research center, CITOYEN.NE.S, etc. We are the coordinators of this platform, which is delivering, in fact, to many teachers all around Europe in 9 different languages, specific modules on EU citizenship on the one hand, but also on this curriculum that we developed more in general about civic education, because what we are working on is more consistent with your last proposal, which is the most interesting one, in fact, in my view. And it's not by chance if the Commission rejected it, and also the Council rejected it for the time being. But I think it's the most important in a long-term perspective about the curriculum. This means it's not imposed top down, but it's a way to give some opportunities to try to build a common, a shared view about learning objectives and assessment methodologies also, etc. So it's really interesting, and it's exactly what we are developing. And in fact, I also have to add that this interview and dialogue with you is also linked inside our project to the fact that we are going to publish and to write and publish a policy paper, a policy brief for the European level, for the next Commission, about civic education that will stem from your own report, in fact. So that's also why it was really important for us to fully understand what was going on after that. It's really interesting, this point about the curriculum. And let's hope also that we will be able in whatever the positions and roles that we respectively have to fight together in this field for this kind of objective. So it would be really important. I have another question for you, if you allow me. It's rather about the Spanish situation. I don't know if it's a subject in which you made some specific study, but I can guess that when you also wanted to delve more into the framework and the situation, inevitably you could have a more personal and direct access. I mean, I guess, I think, also on the Spanish specific situation about civic education and the school system. And since we are really interested in cooperating with all national school systems in Europe, in order to create and build bridges of cooperation, tailoring our curriculum offer to specific national needs, I would ask you just what is your vision about civic education in Spain in particular?
Yeah. Before getting into that, let me just complete a bit the previous topic. What we are saying in the report basically is the possibility to act in the short, in the medium, and in the long term. The short term is the idea of the module. It's pragmatic, it's actionable. You don't need to change the Erasmus regulation, you don't need to change the treaties, and it can have a tremendous systemic impact once this module is available to all these beneficiaries. Medium term is the curriculum. You don't need again to change the legal framework because it's demonstrative, it's voluntary, but if it's adopted as a council recommendation, then it's not just an NGO initiative, which is of course very valuable, but it has a degree of, institutional validity or officiality that can make it adopted by some national systems. And the long term is the reform of the treaties in order to give a competency to the Union, a shared competency in education, but not in general education necessarily, because we don't want necessarily to have a say as European Union on the content of physics or chemistry or national languages. But we believe that specifically on citizenship education, the Union must have a say. So this is why we will ask for this.
Sorry to interrupt you on this point. What about also discussing the proposal to make the Union a job provider for specialized teachers in this field that can work in different EU member states on the topic? Is it feasible in your opinion?
We didn't consider that idea, but I think it's a very interesting one, and we should add it to the package. And another one, which is also for the short term, is to support more the ambassadors' schools of the European Parliament. And here we have a dramatic situation in many member states, and particularly in Spain, and I will come back to your question, because there are many schools that are willing to be ambassadors' schools, and they are not accepted into the program. And this is dramatic. Why? Because the Parliament doesn't have sufficient management capacity. So they limit very much the entry
So
of a new school.
it's not about a lack of funding then, but a lack of
Well,
management.
it's the lack of funding also, because you need more human resources and more administrative resources to manage an increasing number of schools. But it is really dramatic that by default they have created a system, even though they don't call it that way, of numerus clausus. Because I have heard of so many schools in Spain in particular, but I don't think it's the only country, saying we want to be an ambassador school, and they always reject us because there is some other school already in the vicinity that is part of it, because whatever reason. Now, the more general situation in Spain on the topic of civic education, it's very unfortunate and very unstable because of two reasons. Because of our agreements with the Catholic Church regarding the teaching of religious subject in a school. Our agreements with, specifically not with the Catholic Church, our agreements with the Vatican State on the teaching of religious subjects in the schools, and also I will say the insufficient character of secular character of the Spanish political right, that it is very close to the Catholic Church. So that means, these two factors means that for the right in Spain, for the center right, civic education is considered an alternative to the teaching of religion in a school. So whenever the left is in power, civics education is introduced as a subject for everyone. But when the right is in power, the subject is deleted and made an alternative to those that don't pick up religion, Catholic religion in the school. And this is an ongoing discussion, and we haven't been able to, now I'm speaking more from my political, position as a progressive, that civic education is for everyone. It's not only for those sinners that don't take religion in the school. But this is still not an unsolved question in the Spanish system.
That's really interesting. I didn't know about this kind of situation and perspective, and it's really interesting also because in Italy, comparing with the situation in Italy, we also have an agreement with the Vatican about religious education in the school system. And yes, we call it, if you don't choose to have that kind of teaching, you have to choose what we call the alternativa, and that's already in the name. You can hear that kind of perspective.
The same as in Spain. Exactly the same.
But at the same time, in 2019, we had a new law at the national level about civic education itself instead, which is become a specific subject with its own amount of hours, etc. Yeah. So the two things are more separated, even if the alternativa in the primary level, for example, schools, is always about civic education in a second way. Mm-hmm. So this idea about either religion, either civic education is also there in Italy in a way. But the situation is better thanks to the law itself, I think. So that's really interesting. I have a last question for you, a very, very short one. It's very just about the future. But before that question, I just wanted to add to be more clear, since you also thought that the proposal I made about the EU made a job provider for a specific group of teachers, etc., is maybe a good one. I want to stress also that I think it should be part, obviously, not just because of legal reasons of a reform of the treaties, but also because of substantial political reasons, because at the same time, I think that that kind of step should be linked not just with the technical reforming process of the treaties, but also to a substantial change in what the European Union is, in terms of the constitutional compact in terms of a fully fledged kind of democracy, also at the European scale. And I think that the contradiction between the word treaty and the word constitution is still a very important one, despite the failure of the constitutional treaty and of the beginning of this century, which in itself, calling it constitutional treaty in a way, or treaty in establishing a constitution for Europe, in itself, including both words, was already a contradiction and a sort of way of stressing that constitution was not used in the real substantial meaning in that phase. So what I hope and I wish for Europe as a European is to come back to that debate about a constitutionalization of our space of freedom and liberty and rights, etc., but not with treaties. I know that this means also a step forward also for what regards our very legal framework today, for which the states and the head of states and governments are the leader of each reforming process, and they have the last say, we can say, because even if the ratification process is not can be also a referendum at the national level or an approval by national parliaments, but the text itself of what we approve as Europeans is approved, in fact, by the head of states and governments, and that's rather different from approving a constitutional text by people's representatives. So what I wanted to add is just that the kind of technical reforming processes and technical step forward for European unity that we can make in this era, in this historical period, should be accompanied by also, I think, this substantial step forward in the debate about the constitutionalization of Europe itself. They should not be separated, as the integration process itself attempted to do in all over its long history. I don't know if you agree with this kind of vision.
Yes, of course, I'm in favor of a federal constitution for Europe, and this is why in the Conference on the Future of Europe, we precisely advocated to reform the Lisbon Treaty in a federal way. By the way, in that conference, I forgot to mention, it's important, the citizens in the citizens panels asked for common standard, I think common or standard minimum content about the EU in every member state, which is also something that we mentioned in our report. So I'm totally in favor. Now, I wouldn't be so obsessed about treaty or constitutional treaty, because in fact, the moment, for me, the moment an international treaty is approved by the European Parliament, and even more if it's also approved in a referendum, then in fact, this double majority of states and citizens fulfills the requirement of a federal constitution. Even in some cases, you have seen that the procedure includes the process of an international treaty at the beginning, but the end is a constitution. So it could become like a nominal debate, because I remember when Gorbachev, for instance, proposed the federal constitution for the new reformed Soviet Union, he was proposing in fact a treaty to the constituent republics of the Soviet Union. So what matters is the content and how it is approved.
Okay, yeah, that's true. That's true. But at the same time, when I talked about constitution, it's not just about the name. It's also about the kind of question you ask to the people to debate about. And that's important because one of the things that I think also the federalist movement itself at the European level tended to do, maybe also for the very reason that you already mentioned, that is to say, 4 generations after the World War, for example, you lost the reasons that at the beginning were already there for everybody was agreed with the perspective of a union, of a kind of peaceful union, because of the experience they shared. Nowadays, we do not share anymore those experiences, mainly. So what are we going to share in order to create a federation, for example, in such a way that is not just a technical step forward by an elite, made by an elite, which is aware, but which would be maybe the raising of Euroscepticism and nationalism show us against a sort of, maybe not the majority, but a huge part of the people which do not understand, simply do not understand anymore. And maybe also they misunderstand. They think you are doing that because of whatever obscure reasons, etc. So I think that the process itself, if we did that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, would have been different. Nowadays, we cannot escape from a general debate about that, in which, yes, we risk also to have a huge part of the people which at the beginning won't be able to really understand, but we have to involve them, I think, in a way, because otherwise, even if we achieve in terms of the final result, this is not the very same result we would have and we want also in terms of democracy. That's my fear, at least. That's why I was talking about a constitutional moment. We can use other words.
I'm in favor of the constitutional moment. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So the last question was, do you think in the new parliament, which is going to kickstart its new term in the next week, there are already, in your knowledge, key MEPs which will be able and who are keen to pursue that kind of battle about civic education for Europe inside the new parliament.
Yes, and my proposal for the new parliament is that we organize an intergroup of MEPs from the different political groups, which they will be mostly, if not all, from Christian Democrats, Social Democrats, Liberals, Greens, and the left, to work on this topic, and specifically on pushing for the development of the common curriculum. And I will even suggest to this intergroup that I will try to form, even from the outside, from the civil society side, to start even gathering in collaboration with centers like yours and others, to gather a bit of a mosaic of experiences on the curriculum, because we know that the Commission is not going to do it on its own anytime soon. So we need to put a bit of pressure on the Commission and to say, look, you haven't been forthcoming. We from Parliament have a position, and we are not going to forget about it in this 10th legislature. And we're going even to propose you some models based on the experiences that we are gathering. I think that will maybe put the right pressure on the Commission.
Okay. That's a very, very good news for us, I think, because it's really important to have in the Parliament an intergroup devoted to this subject. So I think that's the right way also to end our dialogue for today, at least. And so I will thank you. I want to thank you again very, very much for accepting our invitation, and also for the job you've made in the last term and the job you're going to make in the next one for Europe and for a civic education framework, which is consistent with the idea, with the very idea of a European education area, because that's also the kind of objective we have to. Since the Commission works on the European education area, we cannot have a European education area without a common framework for civic education. So thank you, Domenec Ruiz Devesa, for being with us, and let's hope to keep fighting together on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.